is Slow Medicine Radio. Our host is integrative medicine Dr. Michael Finkelstein. Michael offers medical advice from a holistic paradigm, including both medical and metaphysical philosophies from the full spectrum of human experience. Slow Medicine Radio offers fresh ideas on how to attain a state of wellness that seems distant given the limitations of today's medical paradigm. It introduces you to thought leaders who connect the dots between theory and practice, examining health from a broad perspective with regards to medical diagnoses, conventional and alternative therapies, healthcare policy, and related topics that warrant further thought and discussion. Slow Medicine Radio does not prescribe to take this or do that. Instead, it offers an open-minded, intelligent, and practical approach to living, resulting in greater health individually and collectively. Here is Dr. Michael Finkelstein, the founder of Sunraven, the home of slow medicine in Bedford, New York.
Welcome to Slow Medicine Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Michael Finkelstein, and we're here on Mondays at 5 o'clock, 1460 on your AM dial or worldwide at WVOX.com. And the mission of Slow Medicine and Slow Medicine Radio is to remind you that the fast world, the rush of modern life, has an effect on us, and it creates a shift in our energy. It depletes our cells, and if we're not careful, it can contribute to symptoms that might eventually become something that a doctor might call a disease, or just for the most part, we wake up in the morning just not feeling so good. And Slow Medicine Radio is really about helping you see things perhaps that were maybe somewhat obvious to you at some point in your life, but maybe you just simply forgot about some simple things that your mother or grandmother may have told you long ago, and how practically wise they are. Today, I'd like you to actually call in if you have a moment to share with me your thoughts, especially if you listened to my show last week with Dr. Mehmet Oz, my classmate from medical school, who had a couple of interesting things to say on this subject of slow medicine, in particular, the advice that our mothers gave us. And you can call in at 914-636-0110. I want to begin there. I want to begin with what he said was his hope for the future, which was that one day we would be able to prevent more of the illnesses that people face. And you might find that to be of note because a lot of what Dr. Oz does on his show and even his radio show is to talk about therapies and approaches to health and healing. He interviews a lot of physicians and other medical professionals who have ideas, sometimes specifically directed at diseases, but also very much in tune with the dominant questions that I hear, which is, what else can I do to take care of myself? You know, I don't want to take medicines that my doctors are prescribing. I don't necessarily want procedures. And Dr. Oz on the show last week said, you know, most of the things that are really important are free. I want you to think about that. There's certainly that we can go out and buy vitamin supplements, special food. We can go to our physicians and we can go to alternative health practitioners and pay consultation fees or service fees. And those things may be useful, of course. But he said something that I wholly agree with. And maybe we can talk about that, which is, what's free? What don't you need to spend any money on that actually is conducive to your health? Because very often when we think of complicated problems, we think the solution must be very complicated. But this is not true when it comes to health. Again, that's the essence of slow medicine. When you find the ability to restore your rhythm from the fast life that's affecting you, you can change how your cells function. And when you change how your cells function, you can change how your body does as a whole and how you feel. So what are some of those things? Well, Dr. Oz says something interesting that also is in alignment with slow medicine, which was the importance of building a friendship group. In fact, he said, you know, in the conversation I had with him about prevention, he said, you know, having a good meal with friends, nothing's better than that. He said, but so if you can build a friendship group that naturally resonates the healthier options, you're really going to do yourself a big favor. For instance, if you go out with friends and all they want to do is smoke, drink a lot of beer, and eat a lot of pizza, well, that's one friendship group. If you go out with friends who want to walk in the woods, drink a lot of water, and go to a restaurant and eat wholesome food, that's another friendship group. Now, I'm not saying that most of you will just jump right now to the natural pursuit, but just think of all the space in between. From the extreme in one direction to the extreme in the other, there are a lot of ways that you can tailor a friendship group that's not too much of one thing or the other and move yourself in the direction. Or you can also work with your current friends. I'm not saying actually toss out your old friends and find new ones, but you can talk to your friends and say, hey, together, collectively, maybe we can do this once a week. Can we do this? And then if that group actually agrees to support each other in this way, more easily, you're going to move in that direction. And that's what we do at Sunraven, our farm in Bedford, New York, where we invite people to our home. And, of course, people come just for the day or for the meals, for our cafes, the slow medicine open houses that we have. The next one is going to be December 18th, just as an aside. But we invite people there just to hang out, eat some good food, listen to some nice music, be in a really nice, comfortable environment, meet some interesting people, maybe come back, maybe do one of our programs, our men's program, our women's programs, a couples program, maybe take a hike with me once a week. That's what I do with my men's group. Or maybe you come just learn about gardening or learn about something else that we're doing that is also one of your interests. Well, this is the way that you do it. You find something to do that you're not necessarily doing regularly now and move in that direction. So building a friendship group community, I think, is one of the main tenets of slow medicine. In fact, I've created, if you have a copy of my book, Slow Medicine, Hope and Healing for Chronic Illness, you'll see on page 222 a diagram. You can also find this on the website, slowmedicinedoctor.com, a diagram which I call the Slow Medicine Wheel of Health. And there are 7 spokes on that wheel, one of which is community. And the importance that I feel and emphasize on that ability to sort of find and secure friends who will naturally resonate that healthier option for you. Again, just a step in the right direction, not to become a saint in any form. Call me, 914-636-0110, if you'd like to comment about that. The other thing that Dr. Oz said is if it's too good to be true, it probably is. Meaning the promises of many people about health and healing, especially when you have to buy something, whether they're supplements, vitamins, natural cures and remedies. There are many good products out there, don't get me wrong. But when somebody is a little bit more pushy than that, promoting an idea, especially something that you buy, and it sounds like an incredible promise, then I think you have to be quite skeptical, or it's fair to be skeptical. And therefore go back to those options which might feel like they're more available to you, and they're not going to be an expense. Because I think it starts in our own home, what we can do to be healthier and to feel better. And in fact, I would say maybe 90%, some number like that, some almost all, but 90% of what you need to do for yourself to get off of medications, to feel better, to move your body better, to have better relationships, to enjoy your life much more, 90% is something that you can do in your own home with just some adjustments of the way you organize that home, the choices you make there, and the way you live your life. It's not about buying more things. So think about that. The other thing Dr. Oz said is that when people do suggest to you to go after something, to try something, an approach of one form or another that might be new to you, something you're not that familiar with, again, it might sound very good, but how would you then even analyze some of those things that may be worth it? And he used the word triangulate. He said, look for corroborating evidence to suggest that that advice that you're receiving from one source can be found in a few others. He said 2 or 3. That's where the concept of triangle comes from. If you can find 2 or 3 other sources to corroborate the same recommendation, and those sources in particular are credible, the most credible perhaps being those that are published in medical journals, or perhaps have the endorsement of groups of people that you know, then I think you're onto something. The other thing that you can use, because sometimes there isn't medical advice or medical journals that have that information, and I'll admit, sometimes, just to be fair, the quality of medical journals and some of the research on occasion is not reliable, in which case we can't always believe everything we read in journals. And I learned that in medical school, that about 50% of what you learn in medical school is not going to be proven to be accurate down the road, because more information over time is learned. And occasionally there are people who do research who, for whatever reason, I'm not saying that this is their intention, but something isn't accurate or done well enough to draw the conclusions that were initially reported. So I'm with you to be somewhat skeptical about medical information. So what I use after I do look for that information, if it's available, is I try to use as much common sense as I can. I try to pass it through my own filters and say, does this make sense to me? And that's when you get back to this idea that if it's something you can do by yourself, if it's free, if your grandmother told you about it, if it's stood the test of time, if it is employable, meaning you can do it without too much change in your life, then it probably makes sense. It's probably low risk as well. And that's where I would like you to start. I would like you to think about the 90% that you can do on your own, in your own home, so that you can, in fact, start to reorganize and realign your efforts and your intention so that you can, over time, feel the effects of pulling yourself into that type of alignment and that state of health and wholeness. Again, I'd like to share this conversation with you, and if you have a thought, maybe one of the thoughts you have is about credibility itself. How can you trust doctors? There are so many physicians, the medical establishment itself, the pharmaceutical industry, hospitals have agendas, obviously, not only to stay in business, but maybe to profit. And that competes, and I'm with you. That sort of does taint a little bit the way you can trust the institution. So how do we deal with that, though? Because there are times when we need those people in our lives where we can find that they're very valuable. So why don't you think about that? And we're going to take a break. And if you have a thought, call me, 914-636-0110. Maybe we'll talk about some of the controversies in medicine and how you navigate around those obstacles. We'll be back. You're listening to Slow Medicine Radio. Stay with us.
You're listening to Slow Medicine Radio. You can find out more about the show and the work of Dr. Michael Finkelstein by visiting his website, slowmedicinedoctor.com. Slow Medicine Radio is sponsored by the Slow Medicine Foundation, dedicated to providing community-centered, experiential, and reflective learning for individuals, families, and groups, offering educational programs, events, and resources, as well as insightful health evaluations with customized medical guidance. Dr. Finkelstein works with his wife, Robin Queen Finkelstein, at their farm, Sunraven, in Bedford, New York. And they invite you to visit and take advantage of this unique resource, including men's and women's groups and couples programs. If you think about it, much of what we experience when we don't feel well is a result of the fast world and how it affects us. Therefore, if fast is the disease, then slow is the medicine. Visit Sunraven, the home of slow medicine in Bedford, New York. Go to slowmedicinedoctor.com or call 914-218-3113. And thank you for tuning in Mondays at 5 p.m. right here on 1460 WVOX.
Welcome back to Slow Medicine Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Michael Finkelstein. And again, call me, 914-636-0110. I am sure you have a health question, because every time I go out to dinner, if I'm sitting down at a table with friends and friends of friends, or if I'm at a party, somebody hears that I'm a holistic physician, there are tons of questions. I'm going to assume one. I'm going to assume one because it's dark out right now. It's 5:18, and it's dark out. And, of course, yesterday it was light out at this time, or a couple of days ago it was light out at this time. And this is a time of the year that I think people sort of get hit with winter's coming. I'm not talking about Game of Thrones. I'm talking about just an annual event that occurs here when the season changes and that shift of daylight savings happens so abruptly. I know a lot of people who do like winter. So it's not just about the season. It's not just about the cold and the snow and the inconvenience of weather where you need to put on extra layers to stay warm. But there's an effect that I think is most significant, which is the length of day. And I think we need to recognize that as a real phenomena that for most people does affect them. There is formally something called seasonal affective disorder. I don't really necessarily want to speak to that specifically because that's a syndrome that, as would be the case if that's a diagnosis made, then that takes into considerations all the medical pieces of it. But just for the lay person, the average person prefers longer days, more sunlight. And we know this because while people might like the winter, nobody I know has said to me, gee, I like the short days. I like when it gets dark early. And so since that's the case, we're sort of forced to make an adjustment when the day length changes. And here's what I would say. This is the process of slow medicine. The first thing to do is not to resist it. This is natural. This is the way the world works. The trees don't complain that they're going to lose their leaves around now, nor does the ground complain that it gets cold and maybe hard and frozen. The idea being that there's something in the natural world that requires this seasonality. And so what could humans benefit from this shorter day length, these longer nights? And I would say that the slow medicine answer to that question is take it slow. Do less. Be less ambitious. And I will tell you that I think if you're not thinking that this is like going to be a typical summer day where you're going to do all the same amount of errands and get all the gardening done or the housework done as you do midsummer, if you don't set yourself up with that expectation because you respond and resonate with the season and its flow, I think you're going to feel better just by making the adjustment, by following and being in alignment with the natural rhythm. So again, instead of resisting it, go with the flow. I actually think we have a caller, so maybe on this subject or something different. Welcome to Slow Medicine Radio.
Hi, Dr. Finkelstein. This is Mark from Bronxville. How you doing?
Good, very good. Thank you.
Great. I was actually kind of sick last week because I had a sore throat and all of that, and it always seems to happen right around this time of year with the germs and all of that from every time the temperature drops and we go inside and you just you don't really have much to do outdoor activities, and just in listening to what you were saying about with the rhythms of our body and everything, that I know that my body has had a really tough time trying to adjust to the when daylight savings time ends, and I feel just very sluggish, very tired. I've since gotten over my cold, but I feel extremely tired just from the lack of daylight. Mm-hmm. And I've tried to use special the daylight bulbs, right, in some light fixtures that they say they actually give you better. It actually gives you a better frame of mind, and it can kind of trick your body into thinking that it's daylight. But that it only works to a certain extent, and that we really can't replace the sunlight.
Right.
So
yeah.
That's definitely one thing there. Is there any advice you could give me to try and become more energetic in the winter months like this?
Well, first, thanks for calling, and thanks for sharing this, because this is exactly what I was trying to get to, which is that there's this effect on us that the seasonal change, particularly this season when fall becomes colder and darker, that a lot of people face several of the things that you already expressed. One is a tendency towards certain types of infections, a change in the amount of energy that you have, and then maybe a mood condition that may be related to both of those, but may actually have its own life, if you will. And so the answer, I'll start off with what I was saying right before your call, which is you might want more energy, and I get that. Everyone wants more energy, and there's a way I think that has to be achieved. But what I would say is think about the amount of energy you need going forward for the next several months. Ideally, if you were to design your life, would be less than you would want in the summer. Does that make sense to you? In other words, that you don't want the same amount of energy you have in the summer, even though you may want it. But I'm saying your body doesn't necessarily go after that. It's not going to happen. This is a time when bears hibernate. Now, we're not a bear, but the idea is we have to give into it to some extent. We can't be as ambitious as we will. And this way, the energy that we do have available will be maybe more focused on what it is we really still need to get done. That's one answer. So change your setting point, your set point, your thermostat setting, just like you do in your house as far as temperature. Dial it down a little bit. That's the first thing I would say, so that you're more realistic and that you're not disappointed or you're not expecting something that's not likely to come. The second thing is, you mentioned a couple of things about how because of the day length, you tend to be outside less and move less. But that's really the antidote to what you're saying. Getting outside, because nothing replaces the sun, and movement. Not that you should be exercising in the same way, not that you really can spend all day long outside because maybe you work, as an example, that most people do, or have an indoor occupation of one form or another that doesn't allow you to get outside so much. But if you can manage more time outside on your lunch breaks, in the morning when you first wake up after you get dressed, maybe before you come home or before, depending on when you get home, maybe sometime in the mid to late afternoon, again, step outside. Take one of your phone calls outside in the light of the day, which is far superior than any bulb could give you. Even in the winter, quality of natural light outside is better than anything inside. The fresh air, the movement to get outside, maybe you take the opportunity on lunch to take a 10-minute walk, but the movement outside, I think, could be the simplest answer to give you. There may be other things. You may want to make sure you're not dehydrated. So many people just don't drink enough water, and that has a lot to do with energy. But if you do those things, movement, get outside as much as you can, drink a little bit more water, and set your thermostat down so that you don't anticipate or require the same amount of energy, I think you'll have a qualitative and quantitative shift that will help you feel a little better. The other thing I would say... Thank you
very much.
Yeah, the other thing I would say is think about what you put in your body, meaning how much food. You know how we tend to get sluggish after we eat big meals. This would be a time, if you're already a little bit lower on energy, just want to be careful about that and what type of food there is. This is a whole show on the subject of food, of course, so I don't want to get lost there, but just suffice it to say that eating less, eating more seasonally, eating soups of seasonal vegetables, eating less processed grains like bread and pasta is the other thing that you can do right now that will probably change how you convert energy, how do you utilize energy, and how much you feel is available to you. You just need a subtle shift. If you do these things and you feel, because you now hear this clearly and it makes sense to you and you feel empowered, that's a whole other part of it. If you're wandering aimlessly, not sure, not feeling happy because you're not feeling so good, it's a vicious cycle in the other direction. This, on the other hand, maybe uplifts you because it's clear, it's practical, it's not a big deal. There's no investment here other than how you might just want to set some timers on your clock so that you get outside and do some of those things that I mentioned. How's that sound, Mark?
That sounds great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'll definitely take note of those suggestions.
Well, thank you very much for your call and listening to Slow Medicine Radio.
Thank you.
So that's such an important question. So common this time of the year. I mean, I face it myself. No matter how good a shape you're in, people who ran the marathon on Sunday, they're in great shape. But I've got to believe that now you look at the amount of day length and you're saying to yourself, this is going to be a long winter. And it's true. It is a long winter. This is the time when trees go dormant. This is the time to maybe do a little bit more inside work, meaning within your mental, emotional state, in your heart. Not so much activity, exerting energy. Be conservative with your ambitions with that, but maybe try hard to stay in motion, get outside as much as possible, even though these days are not as stimulating perhaps as a warm, sunny day, but do your best. The principle of slow medicine really is to just get back into rhythm. Just understand that rhythm does change over the course of the year, and that the more alignment you have with those rhythms and cycles, the more efficient you are in terms of how you use energy. And then energy is responsible for everything, including how our immune system works, how we can converse with friends and relatives, how we function at our job. The whole thing is energy. Anyway, it's been a pleasure to talk to you today. We're going to wrap up. SlowMedicineDoctor.com is the website that you can go to listen to this show. Just share it with friends. You can always visit us at the Slow Medicine website, slowmedicine.org. I'll look forward to speaking to you again soon. Take care.